thinks, sits, who stinks, sit, who thinks, sits. Who thinks, sits, who stinks, sits, who tries to read the book which sits on his night table for the millionth time, sits. Rodin's thinker, le penseur, der Denker, sits. A posture of a thinking man, almost melancholic, but not as melancholic as poor Clara. She lost her wheelchair because of that poor, lazy, savage Heidi. Who rules, sits, who fakes, sits, makes up stupid things like fake news, sits as well. Man in suits sitting. Yeah, that's right, they're all sitting and sitting the same old way we do. Only difference? They're putting their dumb fat asses on a throne. Or at least a chair that looks like one. Sitting to dripping. But in case of a re-election, sitting till your ass is leathered. And the seat is over-farted and smells like an organic cow farm with a lot of organic cow piss. Who lies, sits, who tries, sits, who tries too hard to push the shit out of your actual dirty asshole, but it just won't exit, sits. Sitting is luxury. A warm heated car seat in a Land Rover Defender 2007 110 TD4. Feeling like a smoking dad in a Papa Bear chair. Sitting is luxury. Being seated on a toilet is luxury too. According to the World Toilet Organization, only 2.5 billion people have access to put their poo in a proper poo loo. But what if you don't want to sit in a teeny tiny room all together, collected with your personal stanky smell of your excrements? They do have a point. Don't they? But who's what? But still. But at some point I would love to have like this Japanese Toto toilet, which does the job, and you just leave your balls hanging in there and just let them being washed clean. Amazeballs. Who prays, sits, who prays, sits, who touches with his hand the old and the weak and the sick, sits,
1994, the late Pope Paul Johannes Paul II made a state visit to the capital of Croatia, the city of Zagreb. He took with him, along with a lot of suitcases, but above all, he was carrying a throne. That throne had a back which was over 2 meters high. Simply a chair not to be unseen. Es kommt da nicht von ungefähr, dass man es einen heiligen Stuhl nennt, weil ich nenne meine Toilette manchmal zu Hause ein heiliger Stuhl. Und da sitze ich dann meinen heiligen Allerwertesten drauf.
Who suffers, sits. Who bluffs, sits. Who has serious chronic back problem, sits. Der Chefsessel. Wendig. Drehbar. Beweglich. Almost as comfy as a gamer's chair. Like one of those gamer's chair of a 40-year-old bachelor still living at his mama's home and smelled like marijuana and energy drinks and not even considering to leave the house nor the property. Son of a... Who of you has chronic back problems? Anyone? No? But JFK had it too. And he got himself a rocking chair. He even took it on Air Force One. Or gave it as a state present to presidents and state leaders and presidents and leaders and dictators. Who sings, sits. Who dances, sits sometimes. Who wears a 1 meter tall wig on her head, sits. Probably after the show. Let's talk serious now. Not from person to person, but more like from like chair to chair, even you're not actually sitting in a chair, but like from chair to chair. You know what I mean? What am I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you? Well, I can't do that. I won't sit and lay back. It's time to move on. Need your love to feel strong. Who strikes doesn't sit. Who hangs probably doesn't sit. Who hangs at a tree and gets hit by a chair certainly doesn't sit. At the first of the trees I saw the hanged student. I stayed a moment to see if anyone was looking at me. Then I made a few frames and walked over to the other tree, where another student was hanged. I made a few frames. After that I walked toward the hotel and hailed a taxi. Both hanged students were dead by the time I saw them. They got hit several times by a chair. who pays, sits. Who pays well, sits well. Who pays a fortune, like a lot of money, probably just like sits up during this like 14-hour train ride to Siberia only to get served a 4-course meal on a real white china. It's a while ago when public transport was separated in more than 2 classes, dividing people in 3 classes. I'm asking myself why they didn't even consider to have a 4th class for people with no money. Let them stand inside a train. Imagine when finally international companies are offering standing places or standing spots inside their aircraft.
How revolutionary. Or they could actually remove it with those famous white, disgusting monoblocks they usually wear at use at those Jewish weddings. Like at Stiesel's wedding, I saw it last week. Like you can put it on top of each other. Rather practical. It's a damn privilege anyway to fly. I read this article once that only 20% of all the world's inhabitants put their foot on an actual aircraft. I remember the first time when I took the plane. I looked like the winning horse at the Kentucky Derby. Who flies, sits, who drives, sits, who puts their feet up, sitting in a comfortable chair, sits. Pays, sits, who went to a party, has to sit afterwards. Aber da gibt es so ein Sitzen. Who drinks, apparently has to sit. Who drinks, sit, kneel, sit, sits, sit, drinks, sit.